don't ever underestimate that leadership by doing from within, the emic part of things.
Very excited to be able to welcome Lee Fertig, a longtime friend and colleague. Lee is starting a brand new job in about 2 days on the 1st of July as the head of school at Nueva School right outside of San Francisco. He has more than 30 years in international schools and other schools, both a leadership and teaching experience. He's been in Ethiopia, in Brazil, in Spain, and most recently in Belgium. He has been teaching with the PTC for a long time. And in fact, he was one of the early participants in our first PTC courses way back in the early 90s. And in most recent years, he's been teaching both our Creating an Effective School course as well as leadership and team dynamics. So you kind of get a double whammy with Lee. Lee, over to you.
Thanks, Bambi. Everybody can hear me okay? A thumbs up? Yes? Good, great. It's good to see everybody. I feel like this is a little bit like this is your life, Lee, because as I scan through these little squares on my screen, wow, I see so many people that I've worked with in various places, worked alongside, maybe taught at the PTC. I think a couple of you have even actually been on this little patio terrace in Brussels with me in the back of my house a couple of times. So it's great to see everybody, and I'm glad that you're joining this Pearl. Before I start, I will say, just to reiterate something that Bambi just said in her very generous introduction, it was probably about 30 years ago this week that I was a nervous young kid in Rome at the PTC just when it was getting started. And I probably was forced by somebody named Bambi or Forrest Broman to get up and do a Pearl. I don't remember what that Pearl was, but I probably did one. This is my second Pearl, I guess is what I'm saying. And hopefully I'm a little bit wiser for it. And hopefully I'll be able to share something with you. What I want to share with you is, in just a few minutes, is really probably nothing very specific about, the 8 cultures of thinking or something very nuts and bolts oriented, as much as it's really an opportunity for us as school leaders just to think about reflecting on our role and what we do and why we do it. And I will bring in some specific resources as part of that. Let me share my screen with you. Of course, I can't share my screen without my glasses. There we go. Okay. And there we go. 1 second. Okay. So I titled this Pearl, I don't want that. Give me 1 sec. I titled this Pearl, Learning About Leadership from the Outside. And I've been fortunate, and some of you know this, I've been fortunate in the last few months to be in a very, very luxurious position, actually. I've actually been able to take some time off, if you will, in between positions. So I actually ended my role at the International School of Brussels a few months ago. And like Bambi said, I don't really start until later this week at Nueva School in San Francisco, remotely, obviously, for the first couple of weeks. And what it's allowed me to do, what it's enabled me to do, is to kind of just stay on top of everything, but not be in the rat race myself, if you will, as a school leader. And it's a very, very different filter. It's a very different lens. And I just want to share some reflections with you. What the big takeaway that I've come away with over the last few months is, ironically, learning about leadership from the outside only reinforces what I and most people on this call already know and believe. So I don't think this is going to be a new revelation for anybody as much as it's going to be just a validation or a reiteration. And that is, leadership is from within. It's not by looking at things, but it's about dwelling in them that we understand joint meeting. And MICHAEL Fullan actually talks about starting with practice always, always, always. And and a concentric circle that comes out to theory. The reason why I share this is I think in the last few months, I see so many people, hundreds, thousands upon thousands, doing good work. Everybody's really doing good work, but so many voices are theorizing, they're telling, they're debating, they're writing, they're dictating, they're indicating, they're suggesting, um, but they're not necessarily the people, like just about everybody on this call, who's within the system doing. And so when we, one of the courses that I teach is leadership and team dynamics for the PTC. And we talk a lot about leading complex change and developing effective teams. And some of the things, not all, this is not an inclusive list, but some of the things that we focus on in that week-long institute are the things that you see on green in the screen. Situational leadership, which is an old concept, which still has lots and lots of pertinence today, in that leadership is not a generic cookie cutter type of thing. And everybody on this call knows that. We have to adapt to the specific context. And sometimes those contexts change weekly, daily, hourly. We're going to come back to that notion of adaptability a little bit later. We spend a lot of time on emotional intelligence for ourselves, knowing ourselves as leaders. So when I think when you go back to what I said earlier about those concentric circles, at the very, very, very core is us, I as a leader. And who are we? What are my strengths? What do I need to surround myself with in order to be successful in these different situations that are coming my way? And we talk a lot about nonverbal communication as well. So this is what I was referring to. There are so many people doing what I refer to as the etic approach to leadership. It's looking at leadership from the outside. Um, and I'm not saying that's not good. I think that's valuable. It's more than valuable. It's actually necessary for us to actually learn about leadership. But it's a necessary but insufficient condition. And I actually feel like we're almost a little bit too weighted to the etic side. We are writing, we are discussing, we are talking, we are debating about these things, where what we really need to learn from is each other who are actually in the trenches day on day. And that's what many of you have heard over the last week through these pearls, the importance of relationships, the importance of the actual doing, the small gestures on a minute by minute, hour by hour basis. The doing of leadership is not that practice, that actual in the trenches practice is some of the best learning about leadership as well. Some resources, recent resources that reiterate, that reinforce this. Uh, those of you interested in positive school leadership with a real focus on wellness and social emotional well-being, I encourage you to look at this book by Seashore Lewis and Murphy. They focus a lot on schools need and leadership needs a much less mechanistic approach. It's not formulaic, it's not algorithmic. Some of you, my guess is, have read the Culture Code or know of the Culture Code, and then ended up as one of those bestsellers for a while. And Daniel Coyle actually highlights three items that are most important when developing effective teams to create that culture that we want. He talks about building safety, about sharing vulnerability ourselves, individually and collectively as a leadership team, and establishing shared purpose. Those items, those phrases, those concepts right there, in no way, and everybody on this call knows this, in no way are those formulaic or algorithmic. There's nothing that I can say to any of you right now that says, here are the first 10 steps you must take to share vulnerability. It doesn't work that way. We need to learn how to share vulnerability in our own way, in a way that aligns to context. Here are the first 5 things you do as a checklist to build safety. It doesn't work that way, and everybody knows that. I have not finished this. I'm in the process of it. Some of you have read this. A lot of work on adaptability and being adaptive as school leaders, and that true sustainable and transformative change needs constant adaptation. And there's that adaptation again by somebody that a lot of people know about, and that's MICHAEL FULLAN. Wrote a book not too long ago, about a year ago, called Nuance. There's that joint determination. It kind of sounds like shared purpose again, adaptability. And what I think is probably most important, what Fullan talks about, is accountability as culture. And again, I'm just going to reiterate my main premise here. For years and years and decades, so many people, whether they be in schools, at universities, at boards of education, parent groups, have really tried to mandate accountability top down. And Fullan and everybody else says, stop, that doesn't work. You need to co-own accountability. You need to co-create it around that joint determination, around that shared purpose. And it's on the one hand easy to talk about it, debate about it, discuss it. It's another thing to actually do it. And so learning about leadership a bit from the outside has only reinforced what I knew, and I think everybody on this call already knows, and that is to learn by doing. This phrase, learn by doing, learn by caring, interestingly enough, is the prime motto of the school I'm going to, that I'm starting on Wednesday, officially, the Nueva School outside of San Francisco. And I think it's actually really quite simple just to change that if we want, as a collective leadership group in international schools, to understand the importance of leadership by doing, and of course, leadership by caring as well. It's a long-winded way of saying those of us within that school leader role are the ones that are learning the most about leadership and have the most to offer. And I do push back sometimes on people who have not necessarily been a practicing school leader for the last 10, 12, 15, 20 years. And I know Bambi, for one, really won't bring on a trainer or a facilitator for a course unless they're a currently or very recently currently practicing school leader. And I think there's some real merit to that condition, if you will, because it's very easy for me to write a blog about something, to present at a conference and give some formulaic kind of answer, recipe for what right leadership, what appropriate leadership looks like. Don't be fooled by that. You need to hear those messages. Yes, there are some wonderful things being shared in that venue, in that mode, but don't ever underestimate that leadership by doing from within, the emic part of things. The art and science of leadership is in the doing. And I just was actually, of course, with the current situation, just looking at something from a long time ago that Bell Hooks wrote, and obviously she's applying this to something even much greater than school leadership, but it's what we do is much more important than what we say, or what we say we believe. So I don't have pearls because my house is empty, and normally I don't wear pearls anyway, but even if I did have pearls, they're not here. They're in a box in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean someplace. So that was my pearl, and I'm open to questions. Let me take this off.
Okay, well, again, a very powerful message, and so true that, you know, over the many years that international schools have been an entity, if that exists, the notion that we have crafted our profession together from doing, I think, is a very powerful notion. So Lee, people are, I think, are thinking about it. I'm going to just put together some thoughts and pose it as a question to you. Okay. We pretty much constantly, when we learn by doing, we're going to make mistakes. We make mistakes in there. So what are some of the ways or some of the thoughts that you have about creating a culture around which mistake making, even at the leadership level, is okay and safe? how do we, because, you know, people are relying on leaders, right, to, you know, do the right thing most of the time. And how many mistakes can you make until you no longer are, you know, a credible leader? So in that vein, could you talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think it's being more than just okay and safe with it. I think it's actually a requirement, and that's what the sharing of vulnerability, I believe, is what Coyle's really referring to. I think specifically what that looks like, Bambi and everybody else, I think it has to start at the top. It has to start with the head of school and or even the board, and then filter down to principals and division heads and department coordinators and things of that nature. I think it looks and sounds like the following. It looks like maybe at a leadership team meeting, an agenda item that I have put on there myself or somebody else has put on there. And it's an agenda item that requires maybe a recommendation or even a decision by the end of that item. And it's me saying, as we start, I'm at a real loss. I thought I knew the best route to take. I thought I knew the best approach to take, but now I'm hearing that a big portion of the community is actually going to really, really take offense to this because of X, Y, and Z. So I look around the table at my leadership team and I actually say, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what to do. I have some ideas, but I'm actually less sure of what to do now than I thought of a week ago or whatever. So I need people to actually help me with this. You actually are asking for help in order to serve the community as a school leader. That's one way I think it looks. Another one is courageously just standing up in front of a faculty and staff meeting. That could be 50 people, it could be 300 people, it could be 500 people, and doing a very similar thing, and just say, you know, I'm going to try something here, and I might just fall on my face flat. And I think symbolically, that demonstration of authenticity and transparency and vulnerability, it just takes one or two or three instances of that from the top, and it will filter down. It will filter down. One last thing, Bambi, and then I'll go on to the next question. Another way that I find is incredibly powerful is for school leaders, again, starting at the top with the head of school and the board, to solicit genuinely feedback from all kinds of stakeholders about how I'm doing as a leader and serving the community. If we're going to ask teachers to ask for feedback from kids and parents, because increasingly we're doing that, as we should. If we're going to ask high school division principals and heads, division heads to do a similar thing, we can't expect them to do that unless I do it first as the leader. And so one of the first things I did 3 months into my tenure at the International School of Brussels, 2015, is I looked at the job description that I came in under. I looked at my transition plan. I looked at some comments that the search committee and I had agreed upon that would be a part of my transition. And I used all of that fodder to create a very short, simple survey that was sent to all faculty and staff, a large portion of the parent body, and even board members as well. To what extent am I starting to hit these marks according to what the expectations were? That's vulnerability. That's a little bit of courage, and it's a little bit scary, but I think that goes a long way in terms of adapting as well.
So Lee just gave us like 10 pearls.
Sorry.
A whole string of pearls, as he always does. So that's so rich. And of course, as you're speaking, of course, we're now that we have like 4 minutes left, we have a whole string of questions as well. I'm going to try to just put one of those to them. And if, you know, maybe we can stay on a couple of more minutes if we know that we've learned as leaders that, you know, if you starting and ending times matter, but I may fudge on that just a little bit today because we have so much here going on. So we've got, again, as we will, by the way, put all the questions and then hopefully some responses into the resource document that we have put together for you. But let's just, a couple of people have asked about, and I'm sorry for looking away, but I'm trying to do the dual screen thing, and we have a back channel, and my team is helping me see what those questions are. So there's a couple of questions here about the idea that you're about to step into a new role. And it's certainly one of the topics that in all of our Principals Training Center courses, that context of you're about to, or you're preparing yourself to. So there's a few questions around things like what steps are you going to take to learn about the culture of the school you join? I'm going to put 2 or 3 together, so hang in there. You just did that to us, so now I'm going to do it to you.
Yep, that's fine.
So, what are some of the ways that you're going to go about figuring out what that culture is? You described that just now for what you did in Brussels. And as you step into the job, things that you want to adjust for in your new place, what lessons are you taking into that new place from this opportunity that you've had to, reflect on it? You've had several schools, on several continents. So what are you taking into the new school? A couple things like that. Like what are lessons learned?
With transition in mind, I actually have been involved in facilitating some transition workshops as well.
Yes.
There are a lot of easy, tangible things to learn about with your new setting. And ironically, and the Harvard Business Review has a couple of articles recent that actually talk about this. Those are the things that don't trip up a new leader. Those are the things like learning about the technical components, learning about some of the structures and processes that are already in place, learning the who and the where and the how things work. It's more often the intangible, which is culture, which is ethos, that kind of underground river that is so hard to access and tap into, where new leaders need the most guidance from those already in that new setting. So I have actually already, as part of my transition plan, explicitly requested and asked of board members, of my leadership team, of what they call the parent association group, and even some high school students, I've already asked them to help me mostly with that. And I'm actually going to tap some people to actually be my, friendly reminders, gentle reminders. Oh, Lee, you sent out that email the other day. Just so you know, it was fine, but there was that one phrase in there that probably rubbed people the wrong way a little bit. So I'm actually going to ask for that. I'm actually soliciting that information at different marks along the way on my first 90, 100 days, whatever it might be. The other thing, and I'm hearing your integrated questions there, Bambi. I'm just glancing at a couple of the questions in the chat. I think there's tremendous opportunity when there's transition. And so when you ask what lessons have I learned, one lesson I've learned is, on the one hand, you need to be a little cautious and careful about being overly bold. But on the other hand, you're missing out on a great opportunity as a newcomer, especially when you're in this environment where there's so much hunger. There's so much hunger for not only society, but schools within society to reinvent themselves. It's actually the first time I've seen a societal catalyst that actually might sustain itself with everything that's going on with racial injustice and everything else. And I just had my pre-meeting with some board members and leadership team members at the Nueva School. I had my first leadership team meeting on this Thursday. And I will not come out of that leadership team meeting. I will not, without some level of commitment. My first meeting, by the way, some level of commitment from us as a Nueva School leadership team in relation to what's going on in the world and broad-based principles that Nueva is going to commit to actually try to right some of these wrongs. I say that because I think during these transitions, boldness is okay. You need to be smart about it. You need to be safe enough about it. You need to be strategic enough about it. But it's a lost opportunity if all you're going to do is perpetuate what was already there before you arrived. So with this environment, with this climate, I would even say, I would even argue, to be honest with you, that all of us are actually going back in August and September into really different types of schools and school communities that are actually eager and hungry to do something about this. Don't lose that opportunity.